I thought it might be interesting if we talked a little bit about some of the cases that have been called cold cases that you have taken care of, and I guess that starts with your office, doesn't it, Ron?
Well, actually, we have the luxury of prosecuting those cases after the investigation is complete, but in the case of cold cases, the investigation is over an extended period of time generally, and it's pretty intricate and involved, and I really think that Sheriff Rosema can detail better than I can what is involved in actually looking over a case that had not been easy to solve in the past and finding those opportunities to either re-interview witnesses or to test evidence and ultimately to solve cases that have been puzzling in the past.
All right, Gary, you want to...
Well, like Ron indicated, it's a long process, and back in 2009, we went to the county administration and the county board of commissioners and received some funding to put some staff with a focus on cold cases. We had a number of unsolved homicides in the county at the time, so we took 2 detectives, and their sole purpose was to take one case at a time and to delve back into that case and really look at it with a different set of eyes than the investigators had early on. And part of that process involved sitting down with the Michigan State Police, looking at some data banks to kind of take our old reports apart and modernize the way that we look at the data that's in them. And part of that process was sitting down with Ron and having him assign, a prosecutor or multiple prosecutors in that process. So that's where the whole process started. And gradually, they started the monotonous job of just sitting there going through old reports, talking to the old investigators that had retired from the department, and then creating a process where you go back and you sit down with people. And people, that are in that circle of friends of the victim, the families, and start, talking about what they recall from the past. And it's a very interesting process, and it's a very thorough process.
And how do you pick the people to be on this panel?
Well, we pick our best. And that was what we did when early on. We looked at, we wanted to take seasoned investigators, investigators that weren't necessarily any way, shape, or form involved with the old investigations. And because of the fact that we wanted to focus on some that were quite old, it was easy to pick a couple of our best investigators and say, this is your solo assignment. You're not going to be distracted by, robbery cases or current cases. When you come into work every day, you focus on these cases. And we did that. And, the first case we took was the Debbie Polinsky case from 1987 on the north side of Holland. And when that all started, they were all presented with a 8x10 photograph of the victim. And that photograph went on their desk. And so every day they came into work and started looking at that report and delving into it, they'd always see the victim. So they really developed a relationship with somebody that had already passed. And again, we wanted that commitment level and that kind of relationship to start developing, and it really did. And so they began the tedious process, and it really worked out very well for us.
And very helpful, of course, was the fact that sometimes something new would come in crime investigation that would help you.
Well, and again, we really believe that investigators today do a lot different job than investigations of the past. Their work is very detailed now. Not that it wasn't in the past, but how they document their information is so much, I think, better than what we used to do it in years past. They look at evidence, and so again, if you look at it, there's processes in place now from a technology standpoint, from a forensic standpoint, that are so much different in 2015 and 16 than it was in 1987.
Right.
If you think back, DNA, Ron very successfully prosecuted the first DNA case in the state of Michigan. And
Really?
I think that was in 1988.
Yeah, 88, 89.
Yeah,
That's correct.
And and I was kind of proud of that because it was a case that I investigated as a detective before I became sheriff, and I remember being at the FBI Academy in 1987, and they told us about this phenomena, this new process called DNA, but it hadn't been totally perfected, but it was being used by private labs and everything, and when I came back from the academy and I was assigned a case to investigate, I right away thought, geez, the FBI talked about this stuff called DNA, and that person is still serving a life sentence as a result of Ron's prosecution.
Isn't that amazing, huh?
It is. It really is.
What would you say is the most challenging one that we've run across?
Well, it's hard to say among the cold cases. They all have their unique challenges. It's easy to look back to the most recent. The most recent was the prosecution of the murderer of Jana Kelly.
Yeah.
You may recall that this lady was abducted from the Grand Rapids area, disappeared for a period of time, and eventually her body was found out in Ottawa County. And it was investigated both by the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department and the Grand Rapids Police Department for a period of time. It kind of became a cold case, and then Gary's team, the importance of fresh eyes and a fresh view made a huge difference when they discovered the potential for a DNA examination of evidence that had not been done earlier by the Grand Rapids Police Department that ended up solving the case and putting us on the right track. So
Now, Lee Fisher prosecuted that, didn't he?
Lee Fisher did. It's kind of unique. Lee Fisher ended up prosecuting. We were a little bit concerned legally about where to actually do the prosecution. Should we do it in Ottawa County where the body was found or Kent County where the murder occurred? Ultimately, we decided to do it in Kent County. Because the Sheriff's Department and my office had committed so much time to this investigation, we ended up arranging with the Kent County Prosecutor for Lee to be appointed as a special assistant Kent County Prosecutor just for that prosecution. So the actual trial occurred in the Kent County Circuit Court.
Yeah, I happened to see it on television. I saw Lee doing the prosecuting at that time, and he was very, very good at it, I think, and resolved it properly.
He did. Well, he's been involved in cold cases since Gary's team was formed in 2009, and he's an extremely good trial attorney, has a good head for the kind of evidence that we're talking about here and the ability to kind of catalog cases that end up being voluminous and come up with a way of presenting them to a jury. So we're blessed to have these kinds of people on our staffs.
What percentage, roughly, would you say cases come up this way? We can go on for years and years and not have one, but...
Well, I think one of the reasons Gary is going to retire, he's pretty much solved all of his cold cases. These cases have dogged both Gary and my office for years and years, and the ones from the late 80s and so on. I think we've got one more to go. And that looks like we're hoping that we'll get some resolution on that in the next year or so. In any event, we've almost gotten current on our cold cases. There are a couple floating around there, but we've done a pretty good job cleaning up that backlog. And the most important thing, and Gary made this point earlier, is that it brings closure to victims' families. You know, they've been wondering whether anyone cares anymore, whether anybody's taken a serious look at their case after so much time passes. And I can tell you, just seeing their reaction, they're amazed, first of all, and gratified that people do care, and we do try to find some way to resolve their case fairly and justly.